We're back in your life.
Kind of back in your life.
We're on holiday.
I'm in Mexico.
I'm bald. Well, not right now, but when we're filming this, I'm bald. We'll talk about that next year. We're doing our best ofs for 2024.
It'll be a lot of Mike.
And a little bit of James. And also quite a few guests. Mike, this episode is about the best property advice we've had from 2024, which we must say is not actually personalized financial advice. Mike, what are your takeaways from 2024?
Really of the state of the market. It's been pretty subdued out there for quite some time. So basically, we got to get in there while the prices are low. It's Briscoes, everything's on Boxing Day sale, and then wait for those prices to get back up again.
Yeah, so you'll probably hear us a lot talking about taking action in this episode. The other one, Mike, is how much interest rates have dropped.
Oh, haven't they just? We were like 7.85%. I saw them roll off that onto a 5% interest rate the other day, and man, oh man, is that a good feeling.
So enjoy this episode, enjoy all the hot takes for the year, and we'll catch you next year.
Si, senor. This is Sam Stubbs, founder of Simplicity, back to talk about Simplicity's 100-year plan.
Let's talk about housing. So obviously Simplicity is doing some really interesting things. A developer, as you've said, housing is where not building that many houses compared to, we've got less, the number of people in each house going down year on year as we have less kids, as people get older. We've got people moving to New Zealand. It feels like it takes bloody forever for somebody to build a house. We've had lots of government promises over a long period of time talking to fix it. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on, I guess, how you fix the housing problem. And then I guess the maybe secondary to that is, property as a investment vehicle as well.
Yeah, cool. So, okay, so how to fix the housing crisis. It's really easy and it's really hard. Okay, so here's what's really easy. Back in 1960, my mum and dad bought their first house in Mount Albert. They spent 2.35 times my dad's high school salary. So a single teacher's salary, 2.35 times. Same house in the same street, Mount Albert now, is 10 times a teacher's salary, right? So it's actually gone up 4 times. Now, why is that? That is because if you have a look at the number of houses built in New Zealand, there's plenty of charts on this, but around 1979, 1980, we stopped building state houses. Previously, about half the houses were built by private citizens, half of them were built by the state. And that had gone on since about 1890. And why did we stop building them? Well, around about that time, this is way before your time, but this is Britain went into the European community and they stopped buying our beef and lamb. We had a financial crisis with Robert Muldoon where we basically went bankrupt and the IMF bailed us out. And the government, which had previously built heaps of state houses, said, oh shit, we need this money for schools and roads. And so they just stopped building state houses. Back then, 82% of New Zealanders owned their own home, right? So we then began this 30-year Faustian pact. We all decided that that new status quo was cool, and this is why. Once the government stopped building state houses, and this is not a Labour or national thing, all governments made this decision because they wanted to spend money on other stuff, right? Which wins votes. When you say you're building schools and houses, if you say we're going to build more state houses, that doesn't get you votes, right? Right. So they decided not to build. And because 82% of people own their own house, you get same demand, less supply. What happens? House prices start rising, right? And when 82% of your voters own their own house, everyone starts feeling cool, right? People start feeling rich. And then banks come along and they say, I tell you what, we'll do with this revolving credit mortgage, or we'll lend on that investment property because that's a safe bet because house prices keep on going up, right? So the banks massively changed their mix of lending to residential. And then they started coming up with, new products to help you gear and lever. And house prices were rising, everyone was feeling okay. Now there were ups and downs and so on and so forth. So it's not as if the politicians sat in there with some cigars and said, oh, we're going to manipulate the house price market, but it was just convenient, right? And we New Zealanders, including my parents, right, if you owned a house, life's pretty good, right? Now, get 30 years later, 62% of New Zealanders own their house. 20% of people have gone from being owners to renters. And now you can't say, if a politician came and said, our policy is to make house prices rise, you're immediately pissing off 38% of people who are renters, right? They've missed out on the New Zealand dream. So fundamentally, the easy bit is, how do you fix the housing supply? Build more houses, right? That's the easy bit, right? That's the easy thing to say. The devilish thing is how you do that, right? Because the market supports it. Like New Zealanders, let me give this number, 25% of New Zealand families spend more than 40% of their disposable income on rent or mortgages. We are the least affordable housing market in the OECD, right? We're not the richest, but we've got the most expensive houses. So that tells you that there is a huge market for more houses because people are spending a fortune on houses, right? So if you supplied a whole lot of houses, there would be a whole lot of money to spend on this. How do you increase the supply of houses? Not the way we're doing it, right? And the way we're doing it is this bespoke cottage industry, which says, and there's no offense to anybody playing in this market because, you know, we've all developed business models and all this sort of thing. But you go along and you say, I want to buy a first home. First of all, is I want my own section because I want the kids or the dogs to play in the yard, right? Okay, well, that's the first problem. There's only so much land. You've got to go outside of the city, or you've got to slice up your quarter-acre section to an eighth and go up. So first problem is you want to have land, lots of land per dwelling. Second is I want my own standalone house. Well, that's inherently more expensive to build because you've got to build your own unit with your own power supply, your own sewage supply, water. You know,
one set of this, one set of this.
Yep. And by the way, because I'm paying for this, I'd like to choose the taps, please. I'd like to know what the bench tops are. Oh, and you're giving me this option. All you have to do is spend this amount. So that's right. So we have this bespoke cottage building industry where the biggest house builders in the country are measured by the hundreds of houses that they build, yet the need we have is for tens of thousands, right? So, and also, you know, New Zealanders are in love with a standalone house, and we built a whole lot of crappy apartments, which means we don't like the idea of apartment living, right? Which is why 4% of New Zealanders live in apartments, but 42% of people in the OECD live in apartments, right? Wow. So it's amazing. It's that different, right? So most people in the developed world, not most, 42% of people live in an apartment, and it doesn't leak, and it's high quality, and the lift works, and all this sort of stuff, right? Properly managed. New Zealand, we haven't had that. We had some developers who got in and built these things, and just frankly, a lot of them were just crap. Yeah. So we've got a problem. We've got to re-fall in love with the idea of being in apartments. The apartment is your first home. We've got to find a way to mass produce houses, right? So a friend of mine said this beautifully to me yesterday. He said, New Zealand has been awesome at building houses for premium economy and business class. Bespoke houses, what you want. No one's looking after the economy, right? So, because it sounds nasty, right? But most first houses, most people live, you've got to improve your economy class, right? You've got to make that more affordable. So that's what we're doing. So how do you do that? Well, we don't build houses. We run a manufacturing business which just happens to produce houses. We run it like any other factory. We just, we just focus on efficiency. We call it Kaizen. It's the Toyota way. So we just take basic materials, brick, glass, concrete, tin, nothing fancy. I don't like putting anything into our buildings which hasn't been tested for at least 200 years. In fact, aluminium windows, that's the latest thing. They've only been around for about 100 years. And you don't worry about bench tops, taps, customization. You worry about making it repetitive, cookie cutter, and getting efficiency. So when we build a building, we ask every time for all of our subcontractors to find 1 or 2% more efficiency in it. Right, so just constant process of improvement. We also use the same subcontractors. So we use the same family firms. We say, listen, you don't have to tender for this business because you know what tendering's like. Right? Put in the lowest tender, race to the bottom, and then you get it on variations.
And the quality is the race to the bottom.
Yeah, everyone screws you on variations, and because it becomes a relationship of mistrust actually. So we say, we trust you. We just want to do the same thing again. Here's a 2-page contract. Sign it. We have all of these firms who are working for us for a long time. we like them to do at least 30% of their business with us, ideally about 80, but never more than that, because we want them to work for other people to be reminded how good it is working for us. And we pay them on time every time. So they get constant work, which means they can get apprentices in there and train it.
Make decisions. Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of things we do, which are just a collection of accumulated wisdom over the decades about how to run effectively a manufacturing process which produces houses. And it's funded with KiwiSaver money, which means you don't have the banks involved. We don't have any debt, right? So we don't have to have the banks telling us what to do. And you just get on with it.
Yeah.
And so, we started this 2 years ago now, and we built 210 homes, got another 300 under construction right now, and about another 800 in the pipeline.
And running it like a manufacturing business, and then as you continue to get, more projects and learn more and find more efficiencies, just roughly, what kind of discount do you think you're getting in terms of your building?
Oh, well, we know we're building 35% below average. So for those who are in the know, we're building 3-story walk-ups for 2,500 a square metre. What we call lifted products, high-rise buildings for 3,000 a square metre. That's about 35% cheaper than average. In fact, it may even be more. It depends what you're benchmarking yourself against. But equivalent buildings, about 35%. It's also, by the way, because the manufacturing process, it's much faster. It's between 33 and 50% faster than normal. And the quality is also 3 times. So give you an example. So if you see our buildings, they look different from the outside, but they're 95% the same on the inside. On the outside, there's no painted surfaces, no timber. It's all brick, aluminium, steel. Why? Because in 100 years' time, it'll still be brick, aluminium, steel. You won't have to paint them, sand them, replace them. On the inside, you can have any colour scheme you want as long as it's white. Right? You can have any bench top you like as long as it's the one we put in.
Today we've got Jarrod Kerr, Chief Economist at Kiwibank, back for round 2. We're here to talk about themes in the New Zealand economy going forward.
Let's talk about the property market. So we've talked a lot about interest rates in the OCR in the previous episode. Obviously, have a direct correlation to the property market. What are your thoughts over the next, maybe let's go 18 months. What's going to happen over the next 18 months to New Zealand in terms of property? And then maybe, if there's a couple of regions you think are particularly interesting.
Yeah, so, our call is that interest rates are falling this year and they will fall quite sharply next year. So that, you plug that into our model and you start seeing the housing market recovering over next year. And, house prices on our guesstimates should be 5-7% higher the end of next year. So that's quite a turnaround from the correction we've been through, where house prices fell 20% in some areas. So it's a necessary correction, and then I think we're returning to something a bit more normal. Now, through that, you will get some interesting developments. Investors are sidelined. Investors have been hunted by the government.
It's not a bad way of putting it.
And they've also been hunted by the Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
Right? They were the bad agents.
Yeah.
And they did precisely what I think you shouldn't have done in targeting investors, because they're the ones that can really move the needle on supply. And we've got a shortage of supply. But hey, it was, extending this bright line test, removing interest deductibility, slapping on this triple CFA, which is a swear word in banking, all these things, and then also LVR restrictions from the Reserve Bank targeted on investors the most. They really wanted to make sure there was no speculation, or at least, and there wasn't. Anyway, here we are unwinding a lot of this stuff, which is great. And investors, I think, will look at a market which has been through a correction. So maybe an investment that cost $2 million 2 years ago might be coming in at 1.5 now. So that's a little bit more interesting just in itself. But the rent has gone up 5% in the last year. Okay, my rental yield, all my numbers in this investment suddenly look better. And whatever renovation I need to do, I'll probably get a builder where I couldn't 2 years ago. Good luck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of things pointing in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the population growth that we've had. Absolutely astounding. It's amazing the population growth we've had in the last year. Have we built the houses for these people? No, that's not the Kiwi way. We'll just get the shortage and make it worse.
Yeah.
So I think from an investment point of view, have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you worry about it being a much bigger increase in house prices? And the reason I ask that is, so 5 to 7, I go, yep, I can see that. But I also go, there is a lot of people who have intended to move for a period of time. Maybe they want to downsize. Maybe they want to, their house is too small and they want to move. Maybe they've spent some money on their home, they've renovated it, but they need to get their costs back. So there's some pent-up movement around people wanting to move. Interest rates coming down, but then, like you've said, we're not building any houses. We've had all of these people coming to New Zealand. Do you worry we could end up in a place which is, I know people go, house prices going up a lot is good, but actually quite bad, where house prices jump too much too quickly?
Yes, I do. I do worry about that. And it's the affordability issue, and it'll become an election issue again if that happens. So if we're sitting here, you know, a year and a half's time or whatever, and you're looking at the latest Rhines data, and you know Auckland house prices are up 15%, Wellington's up 10%. You know, the regions are at that sort of a level. We're all going to start saying, well, the affordability of housing in New Zealand's just gotten worse again.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what we want. What we want is a response in the supply of housing in this country. We need to increase, you know, at least 100,000 homes to tackle the shortage that we currently have, let alone what we're going to grow into.
Yeah.
Right? We need 100,000 homes now. We can do it. Right? You can use prefabricated homes. There are ways of doing this. But I do really worry that we are going to wake up. House prices have taken off again. You know, people who aren't on the ladder, it's just unaffordable.
Get frozen out for a little bit longer.
Frozen out for longer. I mean, the good news recently is that you can actually say, hand on heart, you know, the property market has become a bit more affordable.
Yeah.
For the wrong reasons, but it's got more affordable. We want it to get more affordable for the right reasons, and that is that we've actually supplied.
Yeah, instead of the
cheap,
demand side. Yeah.
Cheap. It's all the supply side.
Yeah.
The demand side is what we always talk about, but it's all the New Zealand's problems on housing, supply.
Yeah. And then you kind of, just to jump back slightly there, we were talking about, you know, the theme. You said, look, investors are going to come back. And you kind of talked about that in a positive light, like property investors are good for the economy in a way. Now, I know we're sitting under a giant neon sign that says need money for property, so I may be considered to be slightly biased. But, you know, sometimes we will do podcasts on property investments and we're not immune to reading the comments. We read the comments and we get, you know, a lot of people coming at us like, you know, this is bad for the economy. You guys are just taking advantage of people. How dare you raise rents and these sorts of things. It'd be great just to get your insight as to why you think some level of property investment in the economy, on the housing market, is good, and how that kind of plays out. Because, you know, we cop a bit of heat for, you know, saying investors should be in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that, you know, investors have been pushed out, deliberately pushed out over the last few years. I can send you some charts, you know, on the amount of loans that the industry was doing, you know, a few years ago for investors and what they're doing today. It's just dropped off a cliff. And we're even lending more to first home buyers, which is great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Like that.
Yep.
I don't like the drop in investors.
Yeah.
Right? We don't need that. We need that to go the other way.
Why?
Why do we need that to go the other way? Because some people will rent. So we need to provide healthy, you know, affordable rental property, right? And that is the investor.
Yeah.
And you know, the problem with our housing market is quite simply we don't have enough affordable homes. We're actually not too bad at building McMansions and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Not too good at building a $500,000 place.
Yeah. And I find that really interesting because it's, when we are talking about investors in the property market, and obviously we're very pro property and pro people taking action to grow their wealth, and property is a great thing to do that in New Zealand over the long term. Sometimes it comes across like we're just, stuff everyone and go buy a whole lot of houses, when actually, there are stages in your life where you don't have the ability to buy a house. You're young, you've just left school, you just left college, you've just moved into the country. Lord forbid you've just come from South Africa and thrown away 90% of your money because you've had to exchange it from the rand to the dollar. And they do perform a function in the economy, which is actually needed. So yeah, really interesting. I find that really interesting just to hear a take on why they're needed and that they're not the devil.
Before we move on, we talk all the time about planning and growing our wealth, but protecting that wealth is just as important. That's why having the right insurance in place can help when life goes unexpectedly.
And that's why this episode is brought to you by Partners Life, a New Zealand operated award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured and 89% of claims paid.
Partners Life understand that having some insurance is better than having no insurance. They have flexible and personalized solutions for any budget or situation.
Check out their website in our show notes below. We've got the property guru himself, Matthew Harris, here to talk about is now the perfect time to start flipping property. So what is flipping a property? Let's start there.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to do it, but at its core, it's buying a property and selling it again in a short period of time.
Yeah.
I was going to say add some value, but to be honest, you don't even have to do that a lot of the time if you buy in the right place. But it's a quick turnover property transaction that has entered into with the intention of making money.
Yeah.
In theory, it sounds great. I'm just going to make some money real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, and some people do. And if the market's right for it, and the best time to do it is on the start of a rising market, before everyone else has jumped in. But you can do it at any time as long as you get your calculations right. So it is great. When you look at it, it's a cash flow play. So when you buy and hold property, it's a wealth creation over time play. When you trade properties, it's just income.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why it might be a good time to buy, when we're talking about just before everyone else gets in the market and it takes off, Matt talked about two strategies there. One where you buy really well, you don't add value, but you sell it again in a pretty short amount of time to make some income. The other one is you add value to the house. You give it a spruce up, lick a paint, carpet, all that sort of good stuff. That takes more effort. At the moment, if we are right before the property market is about to kick off again, you're more likely to be able to buy a better deal so you don't have to do the adding value piece.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of them lately, the contemporaneous settlements or nominations.
I want to talk about this because this gets risky, but let's keep going.
Yeah, well, definitely. And the whole thing, let's be clear, trading properties has a huge amount more inherent risk than buying and holding. And that's simply because time can undo a lot of issues that you have or right a lot of wrongs in your transaction. But when you trade a property in the short term, 3 to 6 months, you have a very little window to get it right.
Yeah.
But I think, back to the question, why are people trading? It's just obvious. The buy and hold equation doesn't work at the moment for a lot of investors. People are still really interested in property as an asset class. The market is not as dead as everyone will have you think it is. And there's opportunity, and wherever there's opportunity in the market, people will take advantage of it.
How long I'm just thinking, I'll use your place in Kellow as an example. You bought that well on the market. And then
$500,000 on the market.
And then you could add some value to it if you chose to, and then flip it. And the other thing that would make it better is if you gave it a bit more time, right, for the market to continue to move. How long do you have to hold for it to be the longest that it can be?
So this is a great example. So I always tell people the easiest way to make money in a property transaction is buying well.
Yeah.
And that's a really great example of it. But there's two types of money that get made. So in a market like we're in right now, the money Mike has made is on paper. And so the great example is if he waits 6 months to 2 years, that will not just be on paper anymore, because he probably can't sell it right now for $500,000 more than he bought it for, even though the bank would recognise that that's the value. But in 2 years, he almost certainly will be able to, because the market would have caught up and it comes back to its true value. And that's where you can make really good gains if you're going to go back into the buy and hold area.
Another example is Upper Hutt in terms of the deal that we're doing.
Yeah.
We've bought under market, we've renovated it. Now we could very easily. And we had the conversation going, do we just sell this and walk away with, I don't know, $500,000 to $700,000, $800,000, and going, well, actually, this thing is paying really good rent. If we wait till past the bright line period, then we've got no tax implications a couple of years down the road, and then we can reassess then.
So you've just hit on a great point. The fundamental difference that people who are going to go trade have to get their head around is that if you're a buy and hold property investor, you're virtually untaxed in your growth over time, provided that you hold a property outside the bright line period, which is now back to 2 years, which is a really great time frame, stops short-term speculation, but allows flexibility. You can unlock those gains tax-free in a very short period of time. But if you're trading property, you are subject to income tax on the profit in every case. And in addition to that, you're also going to be subject to GST.
Ooh. But you claim the GST back at the start?
You do. You claim. So how it works is in the ordinary course of the trade, you will be able to claim the GST on the purchase. That will give you 15%. It's quite good for traders. They can use that cash refund to quite often pay for the trades that they need to undertake, painting, carpet laying, builder, etc. They get to claim all those costs as they run through. But then when they sell, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So GST is just a cash flow advantage, but it's a consumption tax. So it gets passed basically to the end person in the chain, and you will pay GST on your sale price.
Yep.
All things being equal, you're going to make a gain because that's what you're doing it for.
Yep.
So you're going to pay 15% of your gain in GST.
So you get 15% back on hopefully a lower price than you pay 15% on 15% on the higher price.
Correct.
So you want to have a good reason of why you're going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So like just really, if we're going to use simple math to illustrate, it's a little more complex because it's inclusive, exclusive. But if you make $100,000 profit, 15K of that's going to go to GST.
Talked a bit about, the least risky strategy with the most of the cost. That's the buy and hold, the long termers. We've then got the medium term strategies, the buy, renovate a little bit, and then sell, or buy really well and then sell in a short period of time.
Yep.
I want to dial the risk up again. Now, people love talking about the fancy stuff in finance, and contemporaneous settlements are one of those things that people love. Matt, explain to me what a contemporaneous settlement is and why would this be relevant to flipping properties?
Yep. So a contemporaneous settlement is basically when, so imagine Mike buys a property and he immediately on settlement day sells it to James for more money usually. But you can get contempt where it's literally no more money because they want to get out of it or whatever. But basically it's when there's two ways of doing it. One is you don't settle the property, it just nominates through. The other is when you settle the property and then you immediately on sell it. From Inland Revenue's perspective, there's actually very little difference to those two things. You're taxed regardless. But it's used by a lot of people out there, so we call them property finders. Yeah. And they go out and their basically job or profession or their business is to go find people who are selling properties, get them under contract, and try and resell them to someone else. And so for example, there's groups of people who may want to do trades, might have the capital, but they don't have the wherewithal to go find properties. This is where the kind of space where these guys play. Yeah. And to be honest, if you're good at it, it's a good way to make money. And you can make between $20,000 to $100,000
per transaction. Yeah.
Per transaction. But it's very risky.
It is. Now, some people, when they are thinking about flipping, let's say Matt's selling a house, I reckon I could spend 30 grand on this and get, $100K of value out of it. But I maybe don't have the backing to purchase it and then to sell it again. And I think I can sell it to James. So what I might do is say, Matt, I'll take it off your hands at 500K, right? Give me 6 weeks to settle the property until I have to pay you. Here's a deposit. And give me early access to the property so that I can do some renovations because, I want to renovate it and move in, right? Yep. So then I undertake the renovations on the property. I get all my tradies in, we rip everything out, give it a lick of paint. And at the same time, I'm trying to sell the finished product while we are waiting to settle. I then hopefully can sell it to James for a profit on the same day. So that is a contemporaneous flip. And boy, oh boy, is that a bit of risk.
Yep, but it works. Yeah. And to the right people who do it
It works
right.
if it works.
Yeah, but there's risk reward, right?
Risk reward,
because it's not much cash down. You're not paying a whole lot of interest. You don't have to settle the property, and if you do it well, you can nail it.
Yeah, and the early access clause is really you have to have that
Yep.
if you want to do that successfully.
Yeah.
And what happens if it doesn't work? How does it go to custard?
Sometimes, well, there's a lot of ways it can go to custard. Like the works can take longer.
Yep.
You can stuff it up. You can start pulling the house apart, and actually, holy crap! Like we didn't know there was black mold.
The other big one is you don't find me. So you think that you can on-sell it to someone else.
Or the market starts to go the other way,
Yeah.
which happened a couple of years ago.
2021, 2022.
Were caught and they can't sell for the value they need to.
Yeah.
And one other big one is that the people who bought it to do this actually could never have settled it either way. So they can't settle.
Yeah.
And so the vendor's screaming for settlement. They're getting late penalties. Best case scenario, they forfeit their deposit. The vendor takes it back. Worst case scenario, the vendor sues them and they owe them all the money.
Yeah, and you are, if you're late on settlement, you're looking at probably 15% interest on the entire shooting match. And we were calculating one for someone the other day because they were purchasing a property and they were late, and the seller couldn't sell. They were late, and it was like something about $450 a day.
Yeah,
in late penalty interest, so it can really stack up.
And in your example, you've already spent 30 or 40 grand like renovating the property in the early access period, so you're really in trouble.
Yeah, and so we do hear people talking about this quite a bit, and it's sexy, right? It's got like the moving bits, and you make a whole lot of money really quickly. If you need advice, you need to be a professional to do this sort of thing. You have got to know what you're doing, what to look out for with the property, because like we say, high reward, high risk.
Yeah, if a client comes in here and they're a first-time property investor or even a second-time property investor, and they come across my desk with something like that, there's a long conversation had about whether this is the right choice, whether this meets the goals. They might have to go talk to James, because people will see the flashiness of it and the quick money, and they'll try step outside of their plan.
Today we've got James Kellow, Director of New Zealand Mortgages and Securities, here to talk about the future of housing in New Zealand.
So James, as interest rates come down, there will be demand that will start to jump. There's obviously two pieces to the puzzle. There's the supply side. How are we going at the moment, in terms of, are we building enough houses as the market starts to get ready to move again?
Yeah, the housing crisis, I've never really agreed with that argument. I've always thought we had an affordability crisis, which is two-based, which is one's lower incomes in New Zealand compared to international, and secondly, higher housing costs. Now, if they opened up the supply and allowed alternative building materials to be used, that would massively reduce the cost of housing and increase the supply. But if you had $1 million and you wanted to buy a house, you could go and trade me today. I'm sure there'd be 2,500 townhouses for sale, probably within an hour's drive of Auckland CBD. So there's no shortage of housing. It's an affordability crisis.
And you think that a lot of that is driven just simply by the fact that the build process itself is too complicated, just too much red tape to try and cut through. And then also the actual materials that are required, because there's not a lot of flexibility really in New Zealand compared to the rest of the world, drives that price up more.
Well, I feel mean picking on them, but let's look at gypboard, right?
Yep.
It'll be the lowest tech building material in the world. It's 2 pieces of paper and some gypsum ground up, stuck together. There's 2 suppliers. There must be 1,000 gypboard gypsum cement board manufacturers in the world, maybe thousands and thousands of them.
Yeah.
There's 2 who are certified to be used in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And why
and
is that?
There was one called Elephant Board that came in a little bit cheaper. Then they quickly figured out if they put their prices up to match the gypboard product, they'd make more money, and they've got a percentage of the market.
Demand will still be the same.
A percentage of the market.
Why is that the case if there's thousands of these options and there's only 2
Do
players?
you think it's a hangover from the leaky building? Kind of, we want to control everything and keep it really tight, so the government's perceived that they're not going to end up with that again?
I think it'd be more that the bureaucrats who make the standards will have got a nice glossy brochure with a whole lot of detailed standards in them handed to them and told, make this the product for gypboard, and they just agreed with it. And if they go out there and certify another product, the 2 incumbents, I'm sure, will make a big noise about any weaknesses, or they criticize a lot of different ways. And
a bureaucrat's not going to be rewarded for taking a risk.
Yeah.
So that's just to pick on one thing. That's a tiny thing.
Yeah. Councils are not my specialty. There's a lot of things I don't know. God knows I haven't done any building with these supple finance hands. Yeah. James, when it comes to, like, I just look at it and go, there's councils all across the country. There's a building code. How does it work in terms of councils? Yeah. Can they approve additional GIB boards themselves, or does it all come back to like New Zealand?
I'm actually not an expert on this. I think it's brands. It's the national standard.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And if you so you're talking about like cost in terms of councils, different sort of fabrics that would, make it cheaper. Any idea if we made these changes, how much money we might save in like a $700,000 house?
Well, I mean, it'd surely be 30% you could pull out of it just to make the cost even slightly comparable to Australia.
Yeah.
And with Australia, with high unions, high wages, which I actually happen to agree with high wages. I think people should be paid well for an honest day's work. They're still significantly cheaper than New Zealand.